Okay.
And I'm not sure what's going on. Dadgummit. Okay, we're both in the meeting. It says it's live. We may be live. If we are, I am not seeing any Facebook stuff.
Okay.
So, oh, I think the meeting's live. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Cody will let me know if we're. Okay, he says we are. We're live.
Hi.
Yay! So, hey y'all. This is kind of new territory for me trying to do these live interviews. But today we have Jennifer Tharp with us. Jennifer is a two-time Ironman athlete, and she's going to share some information with us. But first of all, Jennifer, would you share just a little bit about you, your family, kind of anything about you?
Okay. My name is Jennifer Tharp. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. I have two children. I started racing, or I should say participating in races and things like that when I quit my job and was a stay-at-home mom. So that kind of started my whole registering for races, trying to have, those kind of things in my life. And with that being said, that all kind of led to me becoming a personal trainer and group fitness instructor, which went hand in hand with me trying to maintain my fitness levels and things like that. I became a trainer back in 2011 and then a group fitness instructor shortly after that. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I work part-time as a trainer and a group fitness instructor. I have two kids, one's 16, one's 12, and a husband. That's pretty much me.
Oh, very good. So we're actually here to talk about preparing for, participating in, and then post Ironman or other big events like an Ironman. But yours is huge. To me, that's just like incredible to run an Ironman. So tell me first about what are the distances, what are the things that you participate in for an Ironman, and how long are they?
Okay, so Ironman came, I think the original Ironman was 1978 in Oahu. And basically, from what I understand, it was a group of people that decided they wanted to put three of the most challenging events in Hawaii together to make one huge event. And so what they did was they put a 2.4-mile swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2-mile run all together in order to create an Ironman. And from that point, I think in the 80s, it moved to Kona, where currently they have the world championships. And everybody's always, if you ever talk to a triathlete and they mention the word Kona, they're talking about the Kona race, which is basically the original Ironman race.
On Kona. Oh, interesting. Um, there you go. So that's an iron. So tell me about in comparison, a triathlon.
Okay, so triathlon is a swim, bike, run, and they vary in different lengths. And you can start with the sprint triathlon. Sprint triathlon basically is a shorter distance. You're going to have a swim that's about 400, maybe 500 meters. You'll have a shorter bike ride, and then usually end that with a 5K, 3.1-mile run. The sprint triathlons typically don't have like a standard distance that they do. They're just shorter than what we have as an Olympic. The Olympics, what you actually see on the Olympics, and that's just under a mile swim, 0.9. It's 24.8-mile bike ride, and then a 10K at the end, which is 6.2-mile run. And so that's like the medium. And then you have a 70.3. The 70.3 is considered the half iron distance. It is a 1.2-mile swim, a 56-mile bike ride, and a 13.1-mile run. That's what people consider a half Ironman. Still an enormous day, a long distance, all of that. The full Ironman or the full distance, now you have to remember when you talk Ironman, that's the brand. There's several races out there that are full of distances, which is the 140.6. They just don't have the Ironman label. Kind of like with anything else that's a name brand, with the Ironman label, you're going to have a higher price tag for registration than you would if you did like the Great Floridian, which is a similar distance, but it doesn't have that Ironman brand.
Gotcha. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so the Ironman, the actual Ironman, is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a 26.2 mile run.
Wait a minute. Repeat those again.
2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a 26.2 mile run. Now, the one that I just recently did in Chattanooga is the longest one on the course. Because they had to change the route of the bike ride, it added 4 more miles on it. So Chattanooga has 144.6 miles. It does a 116-mile bike ride. Yes, very hilly. Which, it's kind of funny that you say that, because I hear that a lot. On the bike, the hills actually, for me, I enjoy the hills. And I also feel like when you climb a hill, you use your bike and the gears to get up the hill. And then you have that wonderful thing called gravity that pulls you down the hill. And so what you lose on that up, you gain on that down. And so when I compare that to when I did Florida 2 years ago, Florida was pretty flat. I think the only incline that we really had was a bridge leaving Panama City. But you don't ever really get a break. You're pedaling constantly. At least on a hilly course, when you crest over, if you've worked really hard and you need just a moment to glide, you can glide down that hill and not lose any kind of momentum that you have. So there's something to be said about hilly courses. Now, I will take a flat any day on a run course over a hill, but as far as the bike goes, I actually enjoy the hills more on a bike.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, because truly I love the downhill of any bike ride. Like, that's my favorite part. It's kind of like skiing. I don't like cross country, but give me slopes and I just get to ride down. I'm good. So.
Absolutely. You feel like a kid again. I'm riding my bike down a hill and you get that feeling and that little bit of an adrenaline rush of going down really fast. So yeah. That part I really like on the hills. So, as far as that goes, the hills aren't too bad now you'll have other people that hate them, but that's just my perspective on that.
Gotcha. Well, everybody's got a little different perspective, I'm sure. So tell me, you've done other races besides Ironmans?
I have. I've done several marathons. Leading up to the Ironman, I had completed 70.3, which is the half distance. I've done a lot of obstacle course races, a lot of 5K, 10Ks, trail running. I love trail running. I think trail running is great. Another adrenaline rush. You're running and there's rocks and things and you slip and slide, but I love trail runs. I've done quite several. I found early on that because I stayed at home with my kids, I didn't have that evaluation or that boss telling me, hey, you're doing a good job. And what I found in racing was that it was that sense of accomplishment. So I started racing because I liked the feeling that I had done something and there was an end point and I had accomplished something. I know when my kids grow up and they're older, they'll appreciate, me staying home and that. But in the short term, there wasn't anything that was giving me that recognition that I needed. And, as far as like motivating factors and things like that, I found that when somebody looks at me like I'm crazy, when I say, oh, I did a 70.3 last weekend, and they're like, you did what? To me, I found that to be motivating. That was something like, I shocked them. Let's see what else I can do.
So then how would you compare training for an Ironman compared to maybe training for a 10K?
Okay, so when you start training for the initial look at it would be the volume of training, obviously. An Ironman training starts, depending on what your base level is, your actual level of activity, how active you are. Ironman training can start 8 months out, which is a long time. And it's quite an investment as far as time goes. With something on a smaller scale, like a 5 to 10K, you can usually start those 2 to 3 months out, gradually build up to it. The other major distance that I found as I started switching into triathlons and longer distances is that you kind of leave off mileage. So I train mostly by time. instead of miles. So like if you're training for a marathon, in a marathon program, they'll have run 5 miles today, run 8 miles, run a 20-mile, long run. But with triathlons, I have found the most success for me training by time. So with this Ironman training program, I had it where I ran an hour on Monday, biked an hour, ran, an hour on Tuesday. So those kind of things, it was all an hour. So whether I made it to 5 miles or 8 miles in that hour time frame didn't really matter, because the volume of training that goes along, the more tired your body becomes, and you might have a good day or a bad day. And if you're sitting there and you're thinking you have to have 8 miles in and you're only making it to 6, it can be very disheartening. So having a time goal as opposed to having a mileage goal helps out tremendously. So that's basically, I would say, the biggest difference between the shorter distances and the longer distances is that you change your training philosophy. It's not always about making a mileage marker or something to that nature.
So during the race, do each of the 3 events take about the same amount of time, or what takes the most time? Or does it really just depend on the individual?
Well, the bike is going to take the most amount of time and I would say, it does kind of depend on the individual. Typically the bike is going to take the longest amount of time because it's the longest distance. And it's also where you spend the most amount of your time. Training is on the bike, because you have to be able to complete the distance, but also hold back enough that you're able to run a marathon after you're finished. So that's where the training comes in, learning how to basically endure being in the position of bent over on your saddle, learning nutrition, learning what you need to put in your body in order to prep yourself to run a marathon at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Most marathons are run first thing in the morning. That's the only thing that you do. At this aspect, you're getting off the bike and you're moving into a marathon run at 2 or 3 o'clock in the heat of the day in the afternoon. So,
yeah, I never really considered the timing of the events and how that plays a factor in all of it.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to talk some on nutrition, but I wanted to ask a couple more things. When did you decide for the first time to run an Ironman, and why?
Okay, so I had just become a trainer, and I was vacationing with my family, and my sister-in-law had started doing triathlons, and she had said that she had registered for a 70.3. And at that stage, I was like, really? What's that? And I was like, I always wanted to try a triathlon. I can swim to the boat. It can't be, how hard can it be? So that following January, there was a local one in the area, and I ended up registering for it. I had a friend of mine who was a trainer as well, and she's actually a USA triathlon coach. And she had asked me at that moment if I was a good swimmer. And I told her, no, I can swim to the boat. And she's like, you might want to start swimming. It's a 1.2 mile swim. So I got in the pool. After about 2 laps, I thought I was going to die. And all of a sudden, I realized, what did I do? What did I do? This is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was. Because in my mind, I thought, I ran a marathon. How hard could it be? Well, swimming is not easy. So it probably took me about 2 months before I felt comfortable swimming. I then registered for in this area, they had a triathlon training camp. And in that time frame, you completed a 140.6 miles in a weekend. And I thought that would be a great training for me leading up into this 70.3. So I signed up for a sprint triathlon the weekend prior to going away to this camp. When I got in the water in the sprint triathlon, I had a major panic attack. I ended up doggy paddling almost the entire way. I got out of the water and I thought, what did I do? I can't do this. I can't. This is awful. And then, of course, you have all these things that start playing in your mind. And your mind is the biggest thing on any of these races. So my husband said when he saw my face, I was defeated before I even got out of the water. And so I finished the sprint triathlon because once I got on the bike and the run, I was fine. However, in my mind, I was just like, this was stupid. How am I going to survive next weekend? How am I going to do that race? And that entire sprint race, that was all that was playing on in my mind. the next weekend, I went away to camp, and I defeated my fear of the open water. I was put in a situation where we had to continuously swim in the open water. And so I had to keep getting into the water. And the very first swim, I was one of the last people out of the water. And for me, I've always been pretty successful at any physical activity that I try to do. And so it was a humbling experience realizing that I couldn't power my way through it. I couldn't power my way through the swim. I had to relax. I had to own the figure out what I was doing correctly. And so I also wasn't used to being last. And so that, getting out of the water and having everybody waiting on me, it kind of plays a little bit on your self-confidence. So, you kind of think, oh, is this something I should do or not? And through the course of the weekend, being forced into going into the water, I started off the last person out of the swim. By the end of the weekend, I was about mid-group. So I was able, because I could swim the distance, it was the psychological aspect of being in the water, not being able to put my feet down, not being able to have somebody to grab onto or something to that nature that was basically causing me to panic in the water. So, that helped out tremendously.
It's so interesting to listen to somebody talk about one of these. Just, it kind of blows my mind. Okay. So, you've done other ones too. How do you pick a race? How do you decide which ones you're going to run?
Okay, so
compete in?
As far as the Ironman goes, local ones are going to be easier to get to. You don't have to pay for hotel, things like that. Now, with the Ironman, one of the things that I don't think many people know is like the cost of the registration and stuff like that. So when you commit to something like this, the registration starts at $650. And that's tier one, yes. And so that's a tier one. And what I mean by tier one is they have a certain amount of slots that they'll fill for that. Once those slots are filled, they raise the price. And that keeps going up. And you have people that will pay, $1,400 to participate in one of these races. And so, you want to look at logistics as far as where the race is located. If you have to travel to it, are you going to have to ship your bike? Are you going to have to rent a bike? All of those things kind of play into a part, because the bike is something as personal as your running shoes. You are fitted on that bike. It's adjusted to your specifications, how your body is, what you're comfortable in. And so, having to rent a bike would not necessarily work well for most people. So you have to have the cost of shipping your bike if it's a race that's far away, in addition to hotel, in addition to all of those things. So I try to keep my races pretty local, or within driving distance, so I don't have that additional cost. And it also depends on where I am in my fitness. It was 2 years ago that I did the Florida Ironman. I had signed up for that Ironman because the year prior to that, I had registered for Chattanooga and found out that I had breast cancer. And so I had to drop out of training. So I registered for Florida, kind of like I'm going to show you cancer. And so I crossed the finish line in Florida. Almost a year to the date, I was released to start exercising again.
Wow.
And then,
congratulations.
Thank you. And so after that was my motivation for that. And one of the reasons why I picked that race. And then Chattanooga was the one that I kind of felt like I had to go back and revisit because I had to drop out of it. So there's personal reasons, there's logistics, there's money, all of that plays on how I pick a race.
So the cost of participating, the cost of traveling and doing all that. What about equipment? Do you need anything specific? Besides, of course, a bike, and how expensive is the bike, and what other kind of stuff do you need?
Well, when I first started out, I wasn't sure if I was going to like triathlon, so I wasn't going to go all in on the triathlon equipment. I bought a used bike, and the used bike itself was $600, which to me I thought was ridiculous. So I bought a used road bike. It was a little too small for me. And then the shoes, because you have to clip into the bike, so that's an additional cost. You have to buy pedals that fit the shoes that you have. You have to, or you have pedals and then you buy the shoes that fit, either one. I was a spin instructor and I didn't want to have two pairs of shoes because I wasn't wanting to invest a lot of money. So I put mountain bike pedals on my road bike, which I got a little bit of strange looks from, but that way I could clip in and not have to buy separate shoes. You have, of course, your running shoes. If you pick a triathlon where you're going to need a wetsuit, you'll have a wetsuit that you're going to have to purchase, goggles, running shoes. You probably go through 2 pairs of running shoes in the training. Just kind of depends on that. But your bike is going to be the biggest expense. Like I said, mine, I got in cheap. It's $600. But there are people that pay upwards of $15,000 for bikes. And then they add on wheels, and they add on special tires, and they add on special pedals, and they have the aero helmets. I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars on equipment in triathlons. So that's the cost. The registration, I think I already told you about, that's going to be cost. Triathlons are always more expensive than road races because they have insurance that they have to do. They also have to pay for police to block roads off. They have to pay for rescue in the water. So in addition to the volunteers, they have other logistics that they have to work out. With that being said, in addition to the registration, if it's a longer distance and they offer insurance, buy the insurance, because the training is so long and there's such an opportunity for overuse injuries or accidents or things like that you want to make sure that you don't lose your money. So that happened to me with the Chattanooga race. I luckily bought insurance. I was able to have my doctor fill out the thing. I got my complete registration fees back. So it was definitely worth the $100 that I spent on insurance to get back my $700. So
definitely. And then you said for the Ironman, it can take up to about 8 months to train. Is that?
It can take up to 8 months, depending on what your base level is. I'm pretty active. I teach spin. I was still running. So I had a decent base. I jumped in at 4 months. The training program that I set for myself was about 4 months out. And that's when I started increasing the volume of running, the volume of biking and swimming. I'm not a great swimmer. I don't enjoy swimming. So I kind of put that off until the last, I would say to make myself do it.
So then if somebody is pretty inactive, not really exercising, and they decide they want to get started and run a 5K, how long do you recommend they train for that?
A 5K, I would say if you have been doing nothing at all, I would probably start out just to make sure that you don't shock the body too much. I would say about 3 months, 2 to 3 months out to start.
And then is there a time limit on the Ironman, on the triathlons, on a 5K? Is there time limits on everything, or you just go until you get done?
It depends on the race. I do know, with like 5Ks and things like that, they'll have a certain allotted time that they'll have where they have the sag wagon they call, or, the person coming up, the sweeper at the back end. And it also depends on if they have roads closures or things like that on how long they'll keep the roads closed. With the Ironman, you have between 16 and 17 hours to complete it. There are cutoffs. The swim has a 2-hour and 20-minute cutoff. You have to complete the 2.4-mile swim within that 2:20. From that point, you have 8 hours and 10 minutes to complete your bike. And then I believe it's about 6.5 hours to complete the marathon. Now, if you look at it from the perspective of front loading, let's say you're a fast swimmer, a fast biker, but you're a slow runner, you can gain enough in time that you still meet the main cutoff. And typically, most races, the main cutoff is midnight.
So somebody's mentioned the word taper. What are they talking about when they say taper?
Okay, so the training program that I was following, it's a 30-week program. Like I said, I came in about 4 months in. With 4 months left. And so for me, you have 10 weeks for a typical 30-week training program. There's a 10-week base where you're building your base fitness level. Then you have a 10-week build where you're building a little bit of your mileage, you're getting a little bit longer distances, you're adding on. And then you have the 10 weeks that's the peak. And so during the peak, you're going to add on longer distances, longer training, and it's going to keep growing and growing and growing. And then you peak at the top, just like a mountain. You go all the way to the top. And about 3 weeks out, you start what we call a taper. So you've trained your body to all of this volume for so long that now we've reached the limit of what we can train it at, and we want it now to recover before the race. So we taper out at about 3 weeks. And like I said, it depends on the program, depends on the race. But for the Ironman that I did, it was about 3 weeks out. We hit a 6-hour bike ride followed by a 3-hour run. And then we tapered down the following 3 weeks. Now, during that taper, you decrease the volume of training that you're doing, with the last 2 weeks, it being very small amounts of training. So you go from all this time, I think we peaked between 16 and 20 hours. During our peak, our training was between 16 and 20 hours a week. And then you drop it all the way down to like 10. And the last week leading up to the Ironman, I think maybe I did 5 hours of training. So, you kind of see you need the body to give rest, repair, to prepare itself for all of that, which is another huge thing that I am one of those people that, my goal for every race is to finish unassisted. I don't need help, and to finish healthy without any injury. And in order to do all of that, you have to listen to your body. I meet a lot of people that, when I tell them the training plan that I'm doing, they're like, oh, that's not enough. I'm doing this, this, and this. And rest is where we make the most amount of gains in what we're doing. So you have to listen to your body. And if your body's telling you, no, we're done, take that day off. Nothing's going to change in your fitness level if you miss a race. If you miss a run or you miss a swim or something to that nature, I think is huge.
It is huge in personal training, and it's huge really in everything. People often, they just go, and they think, they got to keep pushing. But you're right. At some point you have to rest. And that is like my favorite thing to hear you say, one of the favorite things, because it is neat how you reach that pinnacle, then you take that rest. And then by the time you go to do your race, it's almost like your body's like, come on, we got to go, right?
That is exactly what it feels like. So you're 2 days before the race, you feel almost like you're a racehorse in the stall, jumping at it like, okay, I've been holding back. And so you're ready to get out there. You're ready, and you feel good. You don't feel tired. And it is the one thing I will say about, one of the girls that I was training with, the hard thing for people to understand is the training is so much harder than the day. That training and making yourself get through those workouts and realizing that, this is hard, this is this, it's the training is so much more challenging than the day. And I think part of that is because of that taper, and because you've been for the last 3 weeks reducing the volume of exercise. So when the race comes, you feel like you're strong and you can do this. Whereas during training, you're adding another workout and another workout and another workout. It keeps building and building and building. So sometimes you might question your ability to actually finish the race when you're in training, but you have to trust the training. You have to trust the program. You have to trust that it's going to work.
And that is amazing. So mentally, that I want to talk about that a little bit too, because your body, you're training your body, but mentally, how tough is it to train for it? How tough is it to get through the event? And then I really was hoping you had time to tell me a little bit about, on the back end, after it's all over, what kind of mental state you may go through.
Okay, so mental training, most of that comes, like I said, during the training when you're adding another training workout on top of the one you just did. So you just cycled 6 hours the day before, and now you got to do a 2-hour run. Those kind of things, you have to own the fact that, and I know this may sound bad, I guess that old military saying, you have to embrace the suck. And you really have to understand that it's not enjoyable, that it is. And I think that that's part of the mental preparation though. When you realize that, okay, this is going to be bad for the moment, but the gain I'll get later on is so much better. So I can deal with it right now. And when I'm exercising and I get to a point to where I almost have that, I don't want to do this anymore. What I do is I'll evaluate. I'll say, okay, my foot kind of hurts a little, but I'm okay. Or I'm starting to get tired, but I can make this, next mile or so. And taking that kind of mental, breakdown in self-talk, which, we all have self-talk. Sit there through races and I will, tell myself, oh, this is awful. Why am I doing this? And, you have to flip it. All right. I've found, and I've found in the past that if I give myself little markers or little accomplishments along the way, it gets me through the next one. So just, real quick, like my Ironman in Chattanooga, when I got off the bike, getting off the bike, the first 2 miles of the run are going to be awful. It doesn't matter if it is a sprint triathlon. It doesn't matter if it's a Olympic or a half distance or a full. The first 2 miles of the run are going to be terrible because you've been on the bike. You've been in that position for so long. Now you're upright. Now you're running. So that first 2 miles is going to be awful. So in my mind, the first thing I tell myself when I start to run and my legs feel very tired and feel like lead is first 2 miles are going to be awful. You're okay. You can do it. Make it through the first 2 miles. The next is in Chattanooga, I knew that there were 2 more miles till the turnaround. So my next one was 2 miles. So it was creating these small accomplishments throughout the whole race. Started way back when I did my first 70.3. I was swimming in the water, and swimming is not my strong point. Like I said, I had the panic attack. And the first one, it was 55 degrees outside. The wind was blowing. The water was choppy. Every time I went to take a breath, I got a mouthful of water. And my whole mindset was just make it to the next buoy. If you can just make it to the next buoy, you're okay. So as I knocked off the buoys one by one, I was able to finish that loop. First loop's done, one more loop, make it to the next buoy. And that's kind of the philosophy I take whenever I apply it to any of these races. It's just make it to this next point. When you make it to the next point, then you can evaluate. Okay, I made it this point, you're all right. And I mean, I have this whole mental game going on in my brain, talking to myself, but that's how you or how I push through those kind of things. And that's what I use.
It sounds like, again, it sounds a lot like what we do in life for any kind of goals we have, big goals, is we got to set those smaller goals. Set
Absolutely.
that short term. I'm going to get to this one. I got to get to this one. And then that consistency of continuing to move forward toward that short term goal. And if you just keep going, it eventually adds all up.
Oh, and I agree 100%. I had one of the girls in my spin class, I was telling the story about the buoy and swimming to the next buoy. And she came to me and said she was a grief counselor. And she used that analogy for people that are going through loss. You feel like you're drowning. You feel like you have all of this. Just make it to the next buoy. And, know that, those kind of things, just setting those small little things, you can apply it towards anything. And so that's kind of how I've taken any kind of race that I've done. We're just going to make it to the next point.
Great. Okay, so I've got a few more questions, so we're going to try to get rolling a little bit faster on them. You don't have to answer fast. I'm just going to try to ask them a little faster. Tell me about the day of the event. Because when you go to an event, and I've only done like a half marathon at Disney, and it was, there's craziness everywhere. So tell me about that day when you get there. How does that all transpire?
Okay, so Ironman, you have to go a couple of days early. You can't pick your packet up the day before, and you cannot pick it up on the same day. So with an Ironman, you will have, if it's a travel race, you will have to have hotels a couple of days ahead. The volume of people and the logistics of all the things that you have to have are things that, that's why they make you check in early. So you pick your packet up usually 2 or 3 days ahead of the race. The day prior to the race, you take all of your equipment, all of your swimming stuff, all of your running stuff, all of your bike stuff. You put it in these little bags. They give you these little bags.
Yeah, okay.
You put them in, and then you turn in all your equipment along with your bike the day before. So when you get up that morning to go to the race, all you have is your goggles, if you're wearing a wetsuit, your swim cap, and that's it. You take that down and you go fill your water bottles up on your bike, get all of that ready. But everything's already down there. So it kind of takes the rush around on a regular triathlon where you have all that stuff you have to set up in transition. From that point, you line up on your swim. Swim goes out. With Ironman, the last 2 that I've done, they've been self-seating, which means that you put yourself in line where you think that you could swim, which I prefer that as opposed to going in with an age group. Some of the races, they'll put you based on your age group. You go in with those. I like self-seating because I like to put myself at the back. I don't want to try to fight with the other swimmers. And so you go from that. From that, you leave there. You go to transition. On a 70.3 or a smaller race, transition in this one area where your bike and all your stuff is. In a full distance Ironman, you have a transition tent. You grab your bag, you go into that tent, and then if you get ready for the bike portion. Put on your bike shoes, helmet, sunglasses, sunscreen, get on the bike.
Do you have to take off your wetsuit? Do you have a place to change your clothes? How's that work?
Okay, so on a full distance Ironman, yes, there's a big tent. They have a women's tent. They have a men's tent. You go in the women's tent. If you want to change, you can. I have never changed. I've always stayed in my tri-kit, which is a triathlon suit. So I just basically wear that the whole day. It's nasty by the end of the day, but to me, it saves time and it's one less thing that I have to think about. And so the wetsuit, a lot of the races, they'll have what they call strippers. And so there are people that actually help you strip your wetsuit off, and then they hand it to you. And then all of your stuff goes in the bag. You put on your bike stuff, you head out on the bike course. When you come back from the bike course, now along the bike course, they all have rest areas. They have porta potties. I get a lot of people asking me what I eat on the bike. I'm eating every 20 to 30 minutes. I eat 30 to 90 grams of carbs every hour. It just depends on, how hard I'm working, what I feel like at that moment. I don't drink Gatorade. It makes me feel yucky. So I do what's called like base salts. I do base salts with water. So every 5 miles, I get 2 licks, and then I continue with the nutrition program that you have, which that's, backtracking just a little bit. That's what you do in training. You get your nutrition set up. It is probably the most important aspect of an Ironman race, and sticking to the plan that you have is key. I've had many people that I know that have a plan in place, and then during the race they completely forget the plan, and their race ends up being not a very good day. So you stick with the plan. My plan going into Chattanooga was I was going to have 1 carb, just plain carb, 1 carb with protein in it, and then 1 carb with caffeine in it. And so what I mean by carb is I mean like the little Stinger wafers, the Cliff Blocks, the one that I use the gel that has a little bit of protein. And the reason why I put a little protein in it is because I found during my training, because this is when you try all of that out, is during training, that I would have a hollow feeling in my stomach, and because you don't eat solid foods really all day long. So you have to have something that, you're providing enough, fuel for your muscles to continuously work. So I did a combination of protein between Perpetuum, which is a solid form. You chew it up, it has carbs and protein in it, along with my goos and gels and that kind of stuff. And so
I didn't hear you mention fat once. Do you not consume fat?
Prior to the race, the week leading prior to the race, you cut out things like fiber. It's kind of funny because it's the complete opposite as trainers as we teach people. And part of that reason why GI distress is one of the biggest things that can ruin your race. And so you want to cut out fiber. You switch from whole grains to like simple carbs. So you're eating a lot of bananas, some white bread, those kind of things. I suffer from a lot of GI issues, so I have to be really careful on what I eat that week prior to the race. During that time frame, I'm adding a little bit more carbs, a lot less protein, and a lot less fat. So, those we're just kind of building to the race. The morning of the race, I'll eat a white bagel usually, and I'll have a protein shake with the white bagel. And then about an hour later, I'll eat a banana. And then about 15 minutes before I get in the water, I'll have a goo or gel or something of that nature. And then I start my nutrition about 15 to 20 minutes after I'm on the bike. I don't want to eat in transition because your body's been horizontal for so long swimming, depending on the lace. And then all of a sudden we're upright. Now we're on the bike. And so I like to wait at least 10, 15 minutes before I'm on the bike to get kind of settle in, get into the bike mode, and then I'll start my nutrition at that point. And like I said, it's about every 20 to 30 minutes I am eating.
Wow. Hey, you don't think about all those things that go into a race during the race. You just, you figure people just go. And they grab a drink here and grab something here. What kind of things, it's a very long period of time. What kind of things go through your mind?
Well, and it's a long period of time. And in a triathlon, you can't listen to music. So you're in your own head for a really long time. You can't listen to music. You can't on the bike, you can't draft. So you're not able to bike with someone together. You have to be 6 bike lengths away from other people. So you're in your own head for a really long time. And, with me, the funny part about it is I'll go through stages where I'm singing choruses of songs that I remember. And then I'm like, oh, look, that's the little turnaround. Oh, look over there. So it's just kind of, and then, also, okay, I have, 2 more miles and then I get to eat again, So it's
Right.
playing that mind game, of what, it's entertaining yourself. I like to, on the bike, I want to make sure because I do know that I have to run a marathon after. I try not to get my heart rate up. So I'll typically turn on my watch where I only have the heart rate, not the speed, not how fast I'm going, because I don't want to be obsessed with that. I want to just have my heart rate so I can stay in the range that I want to be in, that I know won't push me past. So when I get on the run, I'm just, dying out. So that's the
So
biggest
how
thing.
big of a factor is that, your heart rate? Another thing I hadn't really thought about, when you're swimming, when you're biking, when you're running, do you monitor it, and what do you try to keep it at if you do?
Well, for me on the bike, I try to keep it under 130. That's, because I know once I get off the bike, I'm going to actually, but that's all kind of independent on what your threshold is individually and knowing what your training zones are. I know that worked well for me. That's to me is a very comfortable aerobic pace. I don't feel like I'm working too hard. I feel like I'm able to maintain it. I don't have any buildup in my legs. There's no burning, anything like that. I'm very comfortable at that heart rate. So my goal for the bike was to keep it at that level. That way, when I get on the run, because I know the run is going to elevate my heart rate a lot more, that I would be able to do that. So I switch it and end up monitoring that and keeping that there. But all of that kind of plays in the same thing with the training. When you're training, reflecting back what works best for you, how well. But you want to go fast enough that you're biking at a decent pace, but you don't want to go too fast that you have nothing left to give on the run.
Yep, that sounds about right. Um, then I also wanted to ask you about, like, how does your body feel when you're done? What does your mind tell you when you're done? And not just that day, but days following. Is there any change in how you feel about a race?
So the funny part about it is that when I crossed the finish line in Florida, I thought I was going to have this moment where like the tears were going to come and I was going to be like, I finished. I crossed the finish line and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm done. You know? And then it was just, that was it. I was just like, okay, I'm done. I even had a friend of mine that was like, we're waiting for the tears. And I'm like, no, I'm just glad I'm done. And I just remember saying that like for the next 30 minutes, I'm just so happy I'm done. And um, so finishing that one, that was different. Chattanooga was different. I had a lot more fun on the Chattanooga course because to me, I just kind of, embraced, what it was. And, we did have this year, they did cancel the swim. So I didn't have the swim to do. So it only ended up being 142 miles as opposed to 144. But I enjoyed the course. And I had it in my mind that when I came through the finish line, that I was just going to take in everything. It wasn't going to just be about finishing. It was going to be about hitting the kids' hands on the sides and, enjoying the moment of coming down that chute. And it was great. I crossed the finish line. Everything was good. I still didn't have that moment where I was like, oh, so I guess maybe I'm just not that crying at the end kind of person. But, so that was good. Finishing, the first one was always harder than the second one. The second one, I kind of knew how I felt. Drinking Sprite and eating pretzels, pretty much all that my stomach could tolerate right afterwards. And then the sense of accomplishment of that moment is enormous. The next day, you feel lost. You're like, oh, I have nothing in the way. So you do kind of get a little bit of a depression, I would say, after something like that. You finished, you feel accomplished, but then you're like, I've spent, 4, 5, 8 months of my life waiting for this one moment. And so you sign up for another race.
Of course.
Which I didn't. Yeah, of course. But no, I didn't. However, I told my friend, I said, when we were training, I'm like, it's like childbirth. You prepare for it all the time. You're waiting, you're waiting, you're waiting. During the moment, it's horrible. You do all of this other stuff. Then you have your baby and you're like, oh, look at that. The Ironman race is just like that.
Oh, that's a pretty good comparison for females anyways. Most of us can
You know,
understand.
I get people all the time asking me, why did you do this again? Why did you sign up for another one? Because you forget, just like you do you forget how bad it is during the race because of that feeling of accomplishment that you feel. The people seeing, the M dot on the back of my car or my tattoo, and they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Yes, I finished an Ironman." Those kind of things. It's the bragging rights on it. So,
Right.
so that's kind of what it is afterwards. And then you suffer. Like right now, I do feel a little lost. I don't have a race in the, waiting for me. So somewhere probably in the next month or so, I'll probably pick something else to keep me motivated because that's what motivates me.
Okay, so 2 more questions. How badly do you think it abuses your body to do something like that? What kind of, like, I know people that lose toenails, that, have other health issues because of that type of training. What kind of things have you experienced?
Absolutely. Well, chronic injuries with running, that repetitive motion, all of those things always can be a factor. I was very good in the first training that I did with Florida and Ironman. I suffered very minimal problems and issues. This one was a little bit more challenging for me. And the only thing different that I can actually equate it to, and I don't know if it's just getting a little bit older as opposed to, was in the Florida race, I did PiYo twice a week, which is a unilateral strength training program that mixes yoga and Pilates. So a lot of core strength, a lot of single side movements that allow for you to address any muscular imbalances. I was teaching that class twice a week, so I really didn't have an option on whether or not I did that. During this training, I didn't have that. I wasn't teaching the 2 classes twice a week, so I wasn't committed to that twice a week. I did try to work in yoga, and I did try to do strength training. However, as the volume increased, I kind of started letting those go to the wayside, which is what I think most people do. So in the event that I do another Ironman, I will definitely put PiYo back into it and make sure I'm committed to it. Florida Ironman, I did lose a toenail. It is something I was not anticipating my feet being as swollen as they were when they got off the bike and going into the marathon. So, typically in a marathon, you have the time that you're running that your feet swell. Whereas this, you were already using them. So my feet were already kind of swollen by the time I put them in there. And so to prevent that this time, I actually got a half a size bigger shoe. I developed during this training plantar fasciitis. So I kind of battled with that this whole time. So incorporating rolling and stretching is huge. I also had an amazing massage therapist that would work on the knots in my calves because the calf was pulling. Everything was kind of pulling on my foot. So we ended up, doing my chiropractor and my massage therapist helped me to try to, keep it to where I could still use it and it wasn't debilitating to where I had to drop out. So, but chronic injuries, when you're using your body this much, it's really important to listen to your body. And when something starts hurting, stop what you're doing, back off a little bit. Like I said before, it's not going to change your race. You're still going to have a good day. You're still going to be the person, but if you continue to push past the point, that whole, pain is weakness leaving the body stuff, that's just a bunch of baloney. You have to stop, back off, reset, and then move on. And, hopefully, with that being said, you can avoid some of the injuries and things like that.
Wow. You shared a lot with us today, a lot of good information, and I am so grateful. And I'm sure anybody that's watching this is going to be grateful too. Tell me, if somebody wanted to reach out to you and have you train them for anything, 5K, Ironman, and anything in between, how would they get a hold of you and, that kind of stuff?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on HomeFit's website. So you can contact through HomeFit, Facebook, personal message, Instagram. I have an Instagram too, both of those. But biggest thing, private message me either way, or you can link it through, like I said, HomeFit.
Okay. So homefitconsulting.com, and they can look at your bio on the website there. And we can absolutely put people in touch with you. Would love to. Hopefully, they'll see what an amazing trainer you are and some of your personalities come through. I've met Jennifer and just love being around her, so I'm sure any of her clients would love to be too. Anything you wanted to add before we hang up?
No, I just think, the sky's pretty much the limit on what you can accomplish if you really have a goal to do that. And, I think that sometimes I have many people say, oh, I don't like to run, or I don't like to swim. And I'm like, I don't like it either, but I like how it feels when you're done. And so I think it's big that you shouldn't limit yourself just because you think in the moment things are hard. because after the moment is where you see that sense of accomplishment and that feeling.
Wow. Well, like I said, thank you so much, Jennifer. And anybody out there, just give her a call or reach out to us, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with her. So
great.
Take care, Jennifer. Thanks again.
Thank you. Okay, Linda. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.